For me, see, feel, and touch means that people are seeing the direction that we're going on these things. On housing, they see things like today's announcement around the attainable middle income housing at MST. That is what people need. They don't want to hear a speech. They don't want to see a meme. They want to see something that shows them that they, in the real world, will make a real difference for them, and that's what I'm committed to.
Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Conversations Live. This is our third event of the 24-25 season. Tonight, we're one-on-one with David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia and the leader of the BC NDP. We come to you from Kem-Kem-Ale, the place of many maple trees. These are the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations who have lived on and continue to call these lands home. Osiem. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. But we also strive to draw attention to organizations that make a difference in our province and in our communities. So tonight, I want to introduce you to Wendy Lisagar-Kokia and Sergio Kokia, the founders and driving energy of Pacific Autism Family Network. PAFN is committed to being a provincial knowledge center dedicated to addressing the lifelong needs of individuals with autism and related neurodiversities and their families throughout British Columbia. On a daily basis, they work with 225 autistic children and adults, and over the years, they have served more than 1,200 families. I encourage you to check them out and see where, if at all possible, you can support the incredible work that they do. Now, just before we begin, for anyone who wishes to pose a question, please go to slido.com, enter the passcode Conversations Live, and send in your questions. Sean, our Slido master, will be receiving your questions and bringing them forward to us. While we won't be able to get to them all, your questions will help to inform me about some of the topics that I'll be asking the Premier this afternoon. Also joining us from Victoria is Vancouver Sun legislative reporter Alec Lazenby. Now, to further set the stage, here is Mario Canseco of Research Co., who has been conducting polls for our Leaders series. Over to you, Mario.
The housing policies introduced by the BC government during John Horgan's tenure remain popular across BC, with about 7 in 10 residents agreeing with the decisions to increase and expand the foreign buyers tax, 2/3 expressing satisfaction with the introduction of the speculation tax, and more than 3 in 5 being in favor of increasing taxes for sales involving homes valued at more than $3 million. Majorities of BC residents are also supportive of the housing policies that were introduced during David Eby's tenure as Premier, with more than 7 in 10 agreeing with the decision to build more modular supporting homes and cap rent increases. Policies that relate to financing, home inspections, and short-term rentals are also endorsed by more than half of BC residents, along with the removal of rental and age restrictions in stratas. BC residents are evenly divided when assessing the ultimate effect of the housing policies that have been in place for the past 7 years. Identical proportions of residents regard the ideas as either effective or ineffective. BC residents aged 18 to 34 are more likely than their older counterparts to believe that the regulations will indeed make housing more affordable. There is no generational gap when BC residents are asked about the BC government's decision to compel municipal governments to meet established housing targets. Practically 3 in 4 BC residents think this was the correct course of action. In no age group do we find more than 1 in 5 respondents believing that the BC government made the wrong decision. 3 in 5 BC residents say it has become harder for them personally to make ends meet. Only 17% say there has been no change in this indicator, while only 3% feel it has been easier to meet their financial obligations. The complexities of the current economic situation are also at play in other facets of our lives. with more than 3 in 4 BC residents saying that it is harder now to buy a house and to save money for retirement, and majorities feeling that it is now more complicated to pay for post-secondary education and find a job. 60% of BC residents aged 18 to 34 say getting hired is more challenging now than it was in 2022. For Conversations Live, I'm Mario Canseco from ResearchGo.
Thank you, Mario. Welcome, Mr. Premier.
Thanks, Stu. Great to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're my most popular guest. Fourth time here.
Hopefully. Yeah, 4 times and more than 10% of your shows.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
We're a good team, man.
Yeah, we are. So somewhere within the next 48 hours, you're going to be paying a visit to Lieutenant Governor Janet Austin at Government House, asking her to dissolve the legislature and call an election. On October 19th, when the votes are counted, what do you envision will be your role in governance in the province of British Columbia?
Well, I think, and it's helpful to start with polling, because I think it does provide some helpful perspective, certainly about what I'm hearing from people and where I understand people are at in the province. People are really hurting right now. They're struggling with affordability. They see the impacts of global inflation here, groceries and other basic costs. They definitely see, especially in BC, it disproportionately hurts us, the rapid run-up in interest rates of the Bank of Canada, as well as central banks around the world, and the impacts of the slowing global economy. And then finally, they're seeing huge growth in population in our communities, which is positive in a number of aspects and hugely challenging in others, especially around the demands on housing and service delivery and other things. People are really and rightly, they're frustrated and they're looking for ways for government to support them in dealing with these things. And so I see my role, if I'm successful in the election campaign, as being channeling that energy into making sure we're addressing those big issues around affordability, particularly in relation to housing, is where I think we can make up the most track. But around healthcare, ensuring that there's high quality healthcare for people, and really making sure that that we're delivering and responding to those concerns that people are seeing right now.
So I was doing a little research about what the average family of 4 in British Columbia earns today and back in 2019. And in 2019, this according to Statistics Canada, the average family earned about $99,000 a year, which put them at about the 28% tax rate. Here we are 4 some odd years later, and they've only seen their annual home earning power increase by $2,000. And yet at the same time, the cost of living has gone up, some say more than 20%. How do we start to ignite increases in people's ability to make money by keeping the economy as robust as possible so that they can afford to live here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stu. I think, when I look at the headline numbers and how we're comparing to other provinces, whether it's around GDP growth or GDP per capita, where we're leading large provinces in Canada, whether it's on unemployment rate, where we're consistently one of the best, private sector job creation consistently one of the best in the last 12 months. Those headline numbers and their translation into the lived experience of people in the province, just on that stat, Stuart, we have the fastest growing wages of any province in Canada right now. And so that'll give you some indication of what we're seeing nationally in terms of people feeling pressure around rising costs and what they're actually bringing home. The provincial government can do a couple of things. One is we need to keep growing our economy. We need to continue to expand our economy through opportunities that are available to us. I'm proud of the work we've done. We need to double down on that. And we also need to make sure that people see the benefit of that in their daily lives. And that means things like going from the lowest minimum wage in Canada to the highest minimum wage, because the people who are really on the edge are working in those really low wage jobs. And basic things like people working in the gig economy, that if they get injured at work, they get the protections of WorkSafe BC. If you're driving for Uber and something happens and you're injured and you're not able to work, that you're protected when you're on the job in the same way that anybody else is, that you have basic protections. So we've been putting those pieces in place. And we know we've got a lot more to do. We know we've got a lot of work to do on this.
Well, I agree that you've done a lot, especially at that early or entry level stage for so many people. At one time, you had put forward the term the missing middle when you were looking at housing issues especially in Victoria. But within the province, there's also like the productivity class of people who go to work, do everything that they're supposed to, and they're sort of going, but what do you have in mind for us? Because we hear about, we all want to support people who need to get above that minimum standard. But what can you do now to support us? Because we're feeling those pressures. Interest rates went up. The economy, it's not crashing, it's not soaring. So, and those salary increases can only come when there's increased economic activity at all stages.
Yeah, and I think that's a really vital question. And so I'll just draw from housing as one example. So traditionally, and I say that kind of loosely, in the last, at least in my political awareness, governments, if they talked about housing and being involved in housing, it was about, for the poorest of the poor, housing for people who are at significant risk of homelessness, or people with profound disabilities, or seniors who needed long-term care, this kind of thing. It wasn't about the middle class. And that discussion just didn't happen through a good chunk of the 90s, the early 2000s, and even up to sort of the late teens. And there's been a big shift, and I hope people are seeing it in terms of our government prioritizing doing something that governments used to do. Like the federal government built housing for soldiers returning from war. They made sure that there were co-ops, the whole South. We're in Vancouver right now, for those watching from away. The whole Southeast False Creek development, all those co-ops, market housing mixed in. Those were federal government programs. The West End, just down the street, all that rental housing built with tax credits that were set up to build rental housing. We've lived on that for a generation. And there were warnings from housing advocates all the way around. We have to keep doing this. We can't stop doing this, because if we do, we're going to run out at some point. And that is exactly what happened. And so government being back in on ensuring that we're delivering housing that's actually attainable for middle income people. I was just up at the Heatherlands site. It was a former RCMP site here in Vancouver, where we did an announcement with Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. They got the land back in an agreement with the federal government, and they have brought the land to the table. The city of Vancouver has brought expedited zoning process to the table. And for the provincial government's part, we're bringing financing to the table for first-time home buyers, where through a financial instrument, essentially a mortgage, we have a 40% share of the properties that are built, which means the first-time home buyer pays 60% of the market value of the unit. Because it is a charge against the title, because it's because it's financing, it doesn't have the same impact on government's books and credit ratings as directly financing the housing, building it, providing subsidies, all these other pieces. It's paid back with interest at the end of 25 years by the homeowner. If they sell, government also participates in the upside on the property, but we're not vulnerable to the downside. Government's the first creditor paid out. And so it gets a bit technical, but the bottom line is we're building housing for middle income people as well, to get into the housing market. And we've got to keep doing that work. If we don't support particularly young people and seeing that they have a future in our province, and we're doing this in the most expensive real estate market in Canada and one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. And if we can do it there, we can do it right across the province and have even more success. So I'm really excited about where that's going. And I believe very firmly that we can solve the housing crisis. We can address this issue for people. But just one example of how we're really going at a group that traditionally governments have been more or less, you're on your own. And certainly John Rustad and the BC Conservatives have been very clear that they will turn that group back over to the private housing market if he gets elected.
If people participate in this housing that you've just announced, will they get ownership, or is it more of a lease situation?
Yeah, it's ownership because it's a Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh the same way that the University
Sanok.
Properties Trust works, or Sanok. It's a 99-year lease, but that's just a function of it being the Indigenous land. And so for other sites, they'll be freehold or leasehold, depending on whether it's an Indigenous partner.
As I listened to you explain that, I was thinking about the Singapore model. Have you been influenced by that Singapore model, and are there lessons to be learned from there that you can apply in British Columbia?
Yeah, hugely. So there are really important distinctions. Singapore did huge land reform and all these other things. I'm sorry, this is very nerdy.
That's why we're here.
I mean, this is one of the most challenging housing environments on earth. It's a small island. There's millions of people, and just the population density alone would make it challenging. But also Singapore in marketing itself as an international destination for financiers and high-paid finance professionals. The local population is competing for housing. The people who run the restaurants and the transit system and everything else are competing with some of the best paid people on the planet for housing. And yet, they've managed to achieve a home ownership rate that is almost the entirety of Singaporean residents. And one of the ways that they've done that is models like what I just talked about with MST. Different. Ours is a BC model. There's the Singaporean model. But the idea that government can be involved partnering with the private sector to build the housing, support people to get into home ownership, that government can also build equity in these sites alongside the private owner and leverage that equity and leverage those loan payments into doing more instead of looking to taxes consistently, instead of looking to borrowing consistently. So Singapore is one of the wealthiest governments on the planet because they have ownership shares in a significant amount of real estate that they then leverage to build more affordable housing for more Singaporeans. And so we can't take, none of these models translate perfectly into British Columbia. We have to take pieces from them. But they do offer a key to solve. If you can solve housing in Singapore, you absolutely can solve it in British Columbia for people.
Well, one of the things that they have the luxury of is that they have a single government. In the Fraser Valley Lower Mainland, I mean, you have more than 20 that cause complications for not just legislation around housing, having a universal code, but if you take a look at the Port of Vancouver, they are operating in 23 different municipalities. And so are you interested at all in looking at some way that we can consolidate governance here in Vancouver under like one legislative body, the way that they did in Toronto a number of years ago, the way they did in New York 100 years ago?
Yeah.
You're looking at me like, don't ask me that question.
No, you're indulging my worst tendencies. I love to talk about policy and get right into the, and this is, I want to go level 5 nerd with you on this. Yes. The short answer is yes. There are complications that make it difficult to build housing, differences between municipalities, just how they've evolved. And we've actually, I say we, I'm taking credit, but our Minister, Ravi Kahlon, the Minister of Housing, has created a portal. We have some municipalities that are participating already where it's consistent application processes for all of the municipalities. The plan is that will also eventually incorporate the BC Building Code and the ability to upload your designs for your housing, and it will automatically, as it does in Singapore and some other jurisdictions, advise you about whether or not it's compliant with our provincial building code, so that you have one consistent portal, one access. It's easy for you if you want to build. It's very straightforward. Of course, I have fantasies about a unified, unitary city-state model, right? I was just at UBCM with like 200 plus municipalities. And they all have their own priorities, and they all have their own goals, and they all have their own things that they want to achieve in their mandates. And one of the difficult discussions we've had to have with the cities and the regional districts and others is we need you to understand what we're facing, the population growth that we're seeing, the number of homes we're building. These things don't match. And we need you to understand what your share is of the kind of housing that we need to build in the province so that we can ensure that we're actually able to address the housing crisis that we face. So funding them to do the housing needs studies for their communities, having that buy-in, identifying specific targets, and then actually holding them to those targets. Where have you zoned the housing? Where is it going to go? These different types that you've identified that you need. And that work is all done at the local level. They are making those decisions. But for us, you got to hit the targets. We need to understand clearly what your plan is to hit the targets. Because if we don't connect those things, if we don't have a consistent provincial plan about that, then we're not going to hit the targets. And the housing crisis is only going to get worse for people. The rents are going to be higher. The homes are going to be more expensive. And I don't understand the proposal that we back off of that we just turn it over to local governments that do not have the capacity to do the population studies and to do all that planning work. We've had to provide them with the support and the shared work that we have to do together.
So Alec Lazenby has been patiently waiting, and he's giving me the sun. Like, I've got a question. So we're going to bring Alec in right now. Alec, over to you. You have a question for the Premier.
Hi, Premier. My first question for you is regarding the Land Act. Earlier this year, your government introduced and then had to back away from Land Act changes that would have introduced co-management with First Nations. Is that something that you would pursue after the election if you were successful? And what would that look like in terms of managing the land base with First Nations?
Thanks, Alec, and thanks for the question. I saw Rob Shaw pop out his head around the corner. He's stealing some of your thunder today. The press gallery, always good times. So the whole Land Act issue, I know it caused a huge amount of anxiety among a number of different businesses that are dependent on different aspects of using land in British Columbia. And certainly, and obviously, that was not the intent. The intent of the legislation was an enabling. It doesn't matter what the intent was. It caused this anxiety. There is a long history of tension around land use, around Indigenous rights and participation. They've ended in multi-year court battles where tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars get spent on lawyers. Major projects have gotten hung up and canceled because of disputes over land use. We should have seen it coming. We didn't do the work. We should have done the work. It was not done properly. And so we pulled it. The minister pulled it at my request. And the commitment is we're not going to take that approach because it is so important that we're bringing the whole province along when it comes to the work we've got to do in partnership with Indigenous people. It's just not up for debate, really, that we've got to find a way to work in partnership with Indigenous people in this province. They've been here for a long time. We're going to be here for a long time. Indigenous people's rights are protected by the Constitution. The courts have upheld those rights again and again. And we can take two routes. We can fight it out in court, have a judge issue a decision like happened in the Central Interior with the Caribou-Chilcotin decision. It took 10 years, cost hundreds of millions of dollars probably in legal fees. And at the end of the day, the court says, I find title here. Government, First Nations, sit down and work out what that means. And so you spend all that money, all that time, all that uncertainty of the court decision. You're still at the table with the nation at the end of the day, trying to figure out what that means. And so we're trying to start at the process where we're at the table together, where we're reaching those agreements. And you can see where we want to go in the Northwest. Amazing and remarkable agreements around major mines opening in the Northwest in partnership with Tahltan First Nation. In Vancouver, amazing and remarkable agreements around housing. Building the housing that we need here. When we do this work properly, and it's not, those are projects that have happened and things that are moving ahead under our government, but it's happened under other governments too. The Tsawwassen First Nation agreement that was signed created regional economic opportunities are really significant for people in the whole area. And that work needs to continue, and it will continue. You could even see, this isn't a partisan thing, let's take Haida. Here's a situation where you've got Haida Gwaii, Gordon Campbell comes into office, he's doing a referendum on whether or not Indigenous people have rights. This is not a government that came in with a feeling like we're going to partner with Indigenous people. And yet, it was Gordon Campbell's government who sat down at Haida Gwaii and signed the governance agreement around Haida Gwaii that laid the groundwork and pushed things forward where we picked up the ball after we formed government. 25 years of work with Haida Gwaii to recognize title on Haida Gwaii. And that started under the BC Liberal administration because they recognized, like we recognized, there was no point in going to court to find a decision that we knew was going to happen. The thing that really bothers me is when people pretend that that is not reality. It's not when people are worried and they need reassurance, they need to engage, they need to know which direction we're going. That doesn't bother me at all. What bothers me is when they pretend that's not a real thing. So what I saw when we did the Haida announcement in the legislature was I saw John Rustad look in the eyes of the elders from Haida and say, this is important. This was necessary. This needed to happen. Congratulations. You can read the speech in the Hansard. And then literally the same day he went out of the legislature and he got on social media and he said, they're coming for your backyards. They're coming for your private property. And he knew it wasn't true. And that is not okay. Dividing us, trying to pretend that we don't have to work together will make us poorer, will make us less successful, less prosperous. We know what the path is. There's only one path. We got to find a way to work together, and that's our commitment.
So there's a ton of questions pouring in through Slido.
Sorry, that was long, eh?
It was good. There's more that I'd love to follow up on what you said there, but I need to move on. So, Sean, maybe you could read question number 2 for us here for the Premier, because it moves into another area that is vitally important to British Columbians.
Thank you, Stuart. From Brian Frankfurt. I could really use a family doctor. What is your plan to hire more doctors in Victoria and across British Columbia to make sure more people can have a GP?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. The way that our whole healthcare system is structured is that gatekeeper, that family doctor that does the referral to the specialist, that supports you if you go to hospital and your care at home, is so critical to people feeling that they've got the care and support that they need. For Brian, for you, for your family, I get it. I know why you need that, and that's why we put a real priority on it. We signed an agreement with the doctors of BC and the family doctors. It's coming out about 2 years ago. And because of that agreement, we've had more than 800 new family doctors come into the province. We've attached to a family doctor in the last 12 months, almost 250,000 people. And in the next 6 months, the rate's picking up. We're adding about 4,000 a week, connecting them to family doctors. We know with the students that are coming on and with the spaces we now know, because family doctors we know who's connected to. We can predict that we're going to add another 160,000 people connected to family doctors. It's still not good enough, right? There's still hundreds of thousands of people without a family doctor. We've got to do the work. We've got to do more. We've got a new medical school that's opening in the city of Surrey to train up additional medical professionals. We've got new spaces at UBC, internationally trained doctors and nurses to get them qualified to support you and your family. And we can see where we're going in Courtney Comox. With a new clinic we're opening there, the wait list will be 0 for family doctors. So it is achievable. For the first time in 20 years, the number of people looking for a family doctor has gone down and not up by hundreds of thousands of people. And we can ensure that everybody gets the health care that they deserve. We just can't stop now. We're making good progress. We've got the Health Connect registry. If you're looking for a family doctor, register. Because that is the best way to get connected to a family doctor, and that work is going to continue.
You know, earlier in the week, one of Mario's polls said that people are saying, okay, I'm open to some radical changes in the delivery of healthcare because we don't really feel like we're getting it, not just in being able to find a GP, but the delivery of healthcare services. And when I listen to you talk about what you're doing with regards to increasing the supply of doctors, do you feel that you have the same kind of momentum in improving the delivery of healthcare? Because at the moment, the perception is that we got some big problems.
Yeah, and people are right. You know, when a rural emergency room is closed, our healthcare system is not working. And they're right to be frustrated. They're right to be open to different ways of doing things. I am open to different ways of doing things. The piece that I struggle with is, and I sit down with people, I ask, well, how is this going to improve things? The suggestion of expansion of private care in British Columbia, the big issue we face, and the data bears that we've got more than 300,000 people in the last 2 years became part of our medical services plan, looking for family doctors, looking for support through the healthcare system. We've seen, coming out of the pandemic, the retirement of healthcare workers. We've seen major population growth. We have an aging population. When people get sick, they're more sick, which the first time I heard that, I was like, they're more sick? They're more sick. They're showing up with multiple conditions. They're more complex to manage for healthcare professionals. And so the issue we have is a shortage of healthcare workers. So when you add the private sector in, and all of a sudden you're competing with them for healthcare workers, there's only a fixed number of the healthcare workers in the province, and we're competing for them. And then you also add in a profit margin. So all of a sudden the public system has fewer healthcare workers. We're paying for the same healthcare workers, likely more, their salaries are probably higher, plus a profit margin for the private companies. How do we end up ahead? I don't understand the math on that. And they say, well, what about Bellingham? You're sending cancer patients to Bellingham. It's like, I understand that. This is not an ideological opposition. When we send a cancer patient to Bellingham to make sure we hit their windows for cancer treatment, because that is a moral obligation, that is using a resource that's in Bellingham that wouldn't otherwise be available to people. It doesn't take away from what's available to people in British Columbia. And so we're open to those solutions. We're going to look for those solutions. We're going to provide people the care however we can. If we got to fly those nurses and those doctors in to keep those places open, we're going to do it. And the big challenge we face is a shortage of healthcare workers, and we're going to keep working, training, recognizing credentials, getting people working in those communities that are really struggling.
I'm getting another signal from Alec that he wants to lob a question your way. We'll let you have a sip of water while he does. Alec?
Hi, Premier. My next question for you is regarding in November 2022, when you first took office, you talked about results that people can see, feel, and touch. How do you feel you're doing with that metric? We've started to see housing prices come down in certain ways, but also people are more concerned than ever about public safety, affordability, those sorts of issues. So how do you feel you're doing 2 years in on that promise?
Yeah, thanks. It's absolutely vital to me that people are able to see where we're going, and that they can see that the big challenges that they face in their lives, that there's a way that these challenges are going to be addressed. They want to know, in my opinion, they want to know that somebody is working for them, understands the situation they're facing right now, and is working to deliver for them. It doesn't matter whether it's affordability or housing or healthcare or public safety or whatever it is. These are big challenges. I'm going to take the issue of the toxic drug crisis, street disorder, homelessness. You can see aspects of this issue across North America. The biggest cause of death for young people in the United States right now is overdose from opioids. It is not unique to us. And people need to see that we're addressing the issue and taking it on. They don't expect, I believe, that these issues will be solved by a tweet or a meme or overnight. These are big, complex issues, but they want to know in good faith the government's taking it on and working on it. So, for me, see, feel, and touch means that people are seeing the direction that we're going on these things. On housing, they see things like today's announcement around the attainable middle income housing at MST. They're seeing their friend move into what used to be an Airbnb that now has a place to rent. They are able to understand and see that their kid is moving into student housing that the government is building on campuses across British Columbia. So they're seeing those kinds of changes when it comes to housing, and they feel that this is going to address those issues when they see the new hospital opening in their community, as is going to happen in Terrace imminently at the new Mills Memorial, and the other new hospitals and roads and transit systems we're building across the province. That is what people need. They don't want to hear a speech. They don't want to see a meme. They want to see something that shows them that they, in the real world, will make a real difference for them, and that's what I'm committed to.
Going to go back to Slido because, Sean, I think you got a question that takes us into another hot button issue in this election.
Thanks, Stuart. From Bill Smart, climate change is a crisis that is impacting everyone and especially people in BC. What are your plans to fight climate change and build a more fuel efficient and sustainable economy?
Thanks, Bill. I wonder if that's Stephen's dad. If it is, how are you? The issue of climate change is a really critical one. I think it's going to be a really important one in the election because there's some pretty stark choices. There are a couple components to climate change for British Columbians. One is the direct impact of the smoky summers impacting tourism, or the fires causing you to flee your home with your family, or the floods that people have had to deal with, the heat dome, all of that. And the other is the remarkable opportunity of the transition to a low carbon economy that's already manifesting in our province. You know, in a city like Kelowna, where we see a major engine manufacturer add more than 100 jobs to manufacture hydrogen-fueled engines. And in the Lower Mainland here, a $900 million investment in hydrogen fueling for those engines to be able to produce, to zero the emissions. You can see the private sector investment showing up around a clean future, the call for power, the impact that that's going to have on BC Hydro's ability to sell electricity to Alberta, down the west coast of the United States. That made us $1 billion last year, made us $1 billion the year before. These kinds of economic generators are really important. So climate change is the threat, absolutely, but it is also a huge opportunity for our province. And the reason why, so for our government's plan, it's about both of those things, about protecting British Columbians, about putting in place the mitigation, the dikes, the forestry practices, all of these other pieces, supporting the wildfire service so they can fight the fires. We had a terrible fire season this year. The reason why you didn't hear as much about it is because the wildfire service did an unbelievable job keeping those fires away from communities and protecting people. And we got to keep getting better. So we're doing that work. And we're also seizing those economic opportunities. What's on the line in the election, but the big issue is that the leader of one party, John Rustad, the BC Conservatives, thinks that climate change is, he told the Globe and Mail, it's false, that carbon dioxide is a pollutant and causes climate change. He told Jordan Peterson that we're made out of carbon, therefore carbon dioxide can't be a pollutant. We're carbon beings, he said. Like, if you don't believe it's real, will you protect communities? If you don't believe it's real, what are you going to say to those clean energy investors that are coming to British Columbia that want to invest here? There's 16 different hydrogen generation proposals for our province. Are you going to tell these people, you know, you're kind of an idiot because climate change isn't actually caused by carbon dioxide, so I'm not sure why you're doing this? Like, is that your message to global investors that are looking for low carbon products from British Columbia? It doesn't make any sense. So climate change is about addressing those threats, grabbing the opportunity, and doing our part for our kids, making sure wherever we can, we're driving down our emissions. We're going to keep doing that work. And thanks, Bill. Thanks for the question.
Well, that's a natural segue to what is becoming both a national and a provincial issue, which is the carbon tax. And you last week responded to a question saying, well, if the federal mandate or mandatory application of a carbon tax were removed, you would look at removing it here in British Columbia. What's your thinking behind that? Why the change?
Well, you know, I really wanted the feds getting involved in the carbon tax to be successful. British Columbians have paid a carbon tax for a long time, and it's arguable that although we reduced emissions and we grew our economy, that it put us at an economic disadvantage compared to provinces that didn't have a carbon tax. The federal government being involved meant you could have a level playing field across Canada, and we could compete evenly with any other province because we all have a consistent carbon price. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. We saw exemptions for certain provinces that politicized it. We saw some pretty dramatic increases in the carbon price at a time when people were facing big affordability challenges. And what I was encountering with people was they felt like they had to choose. Like, you know, I know climate change is real. I want us to do things on climate change. Like, that's important to me. But at the same time, I got to feed my family. I got to knock out that rent. I got to cover the expenses of getting to work. And I feel like I've got to choose between those things. And I don't want people to have to choose between those things. I want people to be able to have a good life for themselves and their families, and also support and understand their role and the opportunity in fighting climate change in this province. And so the difficult decision, But the important decision was to take that off the table for people. Say, look, you and your family and everyday British Columbians, you don't have to make that choice between climate action and affordability. We're going to make sure that we're supporting you in that. And because you're part of the work that we need to do and you're part of the benefit we're going to see as a province if we take on this fight. And we're still going to make sure there's a carbon price for big polluters, for the oil and gas industry. That's another distinction between us and the BC Conservatives, is they're going to cut the carbon price for the oil and gas industry. Some of the most profitable companies on the globe right now will get a tax cut from the BC Conservatives at a time when people need support more than ever. And so important distinctions. We think there's a place for a carbon price for big industrial emitters. And we know that people need that support right now.
Alec, over to you.
Yes, on another topic, going back to mental health and addictions, I wanted to ask you about involuntary care. You talked earlier last week, about implementing involuntary care, but there's a lot of advocates who say that it's already pretty widely spread in the province, and it's the voluntary care system that we need to be building up, with a third of the substance use beds in the province currently actually not offering treatment. So what's your response to those concerns, and what are the plans to continue to build up maybe voluntary care at the same time as involuntary?
Yeah, thanks, Alec. It was vital to me, it was critically important to me that we offer an integrated voluntary care system in the province. We've added hundreds of new treatment beds to make sure people can access treatment in the province. Beds for youth, beds for different people struggling with addiction, and an easy way to access it. We just launched a province-wide phone number. We took this idea from Alberta, where people can just call in and they can get connected to a healthcare professional that supports them with medication that'll manage those cravings, like methadone and Suboxone and other medications like that, but also connect them with those treatment beds and get them in. We did the Road to Recovery piece at St. Paul's, which we're running across the province. So if you overdose and you go to an emergency room, you go right into detox on the site, right into treatment on the site, you get supported in that way. Voluntary care is critically important. But there are a group of people that are not being looked after. And, that these advocates play an important role to advocate for people who are struggling with addiction. But any British Columbian can see it with their own eyes. You can see it with your own eyes in our communities. You don't need me to tell you about the person who's walking barefoot down the middle of the road screaming at cars, or the person who's walking into a retail store and punching out the employees, or the horrific incident that we saw in downtown Vancouver where a man was murdered and another man maimed. It doesn't always show up like that. It can be a person lying face down on the sidewalk where you're like, man, there's got to be isn't there something we can do? A person they do not have the capacity to ask for help. People struggling with brain injury, with mental health issues, with addiction to synthetic opioids and often crystal meth as well. And they need support. These are people who historically would have been housed at Riverview, at a sort of old school mental health institution, but who were unloaded from that facility and driven to the downtown east side. I talked to the people who drove those folks down there and dropped them off and said, this person is never going to be able to be successful in the downtown east side. And they were right. But now we've got another group of people that have been impacted by the toxic drug crisis. They need specific health care. They need specific health care that recognizes where they are. This isn't about forcing people into drug treatment. This isn't about taking away people's rights. It's about giving them a dignified life and an opportunity to get the care that they need. It's hundreds of people. It's not everybody struggling with addiction, but you can see it in our communities, and we haven't been meeting the need. And we have to meet that need for two reasons. One is for their safety, for the people who are struggling. They need that compassionate care and support. And the other is for the broader community. A family going downtown should not feel uncomfortable about the person who's walking around with their pants around their ankles, yelling at people who are walking past. Like, that is just not an acceptable situation, and that is happening way too often in our province. And we will make sure that the folks get the care they need. We'll make sure our communities are safe.
Let me go back to Slido. Sean, another question?
Yeah, shifting gears a bit, a question from Simon. When you came to power, you had a large financial surplus and used that to provide one-time funding to a number of organizations, and now we're facing a deficit and rising taxpayer costs to service debt. How will you manage BC's finance over the next 4 years?
Well, again, I think this is going to be an important discussion during the election campaign. I actually look forward to having this conversation because it's critical. In terms of the province's finances, they're impacted in many of the same ways that household budgets are. There's resource prices are down due to a slowing global economy. People are not buying and selling homes because they're impacted by interest rates, and they're waiting to see what happens with the federal government. People are not going out for dinner. They're not buying stuff from stores as discretionary things because they've seen the Bank of Canada interest rates erode their ability to pay for the basics as they pay more to service their own debt, or they're paying more for their mortgage. So at this time, when we're at the bottom of the economic cycle, where the Bank of Canada is finally recognizing the connection between interest rates and inflation, at least in British Columbia, driven so much by housing costs, and they're finally bringing those rates down, there is a choice. And the choice is now the time to cut services, reduce services for people, and pull back, or is now the time when people need the support? We have a complicating factor in British Columbia, which is that we have added a massive new population to our province. That 300,000 in the last 2 years figure, that's 350,000, doesn't include all of the temporary residents as well that have moved to British Columbia. Their kids need school. They need support in the healthcare system. They need to get to work there and back, roads, transit, schools, hospitals. One of the critiques of the rating agency that engaged with British Columbia and had some comments to make was that our capital budget was too big, and that caused them to adjust their rating on British Columbia. And this is I understand the perspective of the credit rating agency, but it is one factor of many to balance in government. We have to build the schools. We have to build the hospitals. We have to build the roads. If we don't, we risk the same thing that we did during the pandemic with transit, which was when you don't have the ridership, TransLink was looking at cutting routes. And so we provided $1 billion to TransLink to keep them going. It was the fastest recovery of any transit system in North America after the pandemic. And so if we provide that support now, we can continue to grow the economy. These are things that support the private sector, which is why we're leading Canada in private sector job creation. We're 1 or 2 consistently in the last 12 months among big provinces. And it's because these jobs support private sector jobs as well. When we hire 14,000 nurses, as we have over the last couple of years, to provide care across our healthcare system in different ways, that provides that additional support for people that enables our economy to be successful. So the short answer is yes, we balanced 5 of 7 budgets. We will get back to balance as a priority for our government, but we will never do 2 things. One is make people pay in terms of their access to the services that they depend on for that, or put that cost onto people when they're struggling right now in this way. So it is a really challenging time out there for people, and we've made a very deliberate decision about where we're going to support British Columbians, and we're going to keep doing that.
This morning, and for the last 3 mornings, I've been at the Resource Breakfast Series. Your Minister, Nathan Cullen, was there this morning. And in mining, forestry, and other resources, energy development, and so on, as one of the speakers who's in the room here this afternoon, Justin Himmelright, said, we have money, we have shovels, but we need permits. And throughout the whole resource sector, the issue of being permitted is slowing everything down. And if we want to really help drive the economy, the resource sector is still vitally important to British Columbia. The minister admitted it's challenging. And he even said that you gave him a mandate to go and figure out how to cut that time. How do we do that? Because he admitted that it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not easy, but it's critical. And it's not just mining. It's housing, it's industrial development, it's so many different things. And the work that we did around housing in particular, around driving down permit times, The less and so Ministry of Transportation touches it, and Water, Lands and Natural Resources and Forests, and everybody's got a little touch on housing to drive down our permit times on housing, have been deployed now into the natural resources sector as well. So we've brought down permitting times by 40% in the mining sector. We've got a lot more to do. It still takes too long. But we did that with a brute force approach initially, additional staff. We've seen a huge increase in applications, people interested in investing and building in British Columbia. It's great news. Puts demands on staff, slows things down sometimes, especially when you're hiring new people. And so the brute force approach was the first. And now it's about streamlining and expediting processes through what we're taking is a project, a whole project view, as opposed to a permit view. The permit view is you've applied for this permit, I've got it on my desk, I'm the decider on your permit, and I don't look at anything else related to the project. The project view is you are the person bringing the project to the province. We're going to work with you on the entirety of the project and see it as an integrated whole and work with you through the permitting process to accelerate your process. We've got more work to do on that. Another piece of this is the Indigenous partnership and work on this. A lot of nations are getting big piles of requests for comment on a whole variety of permits, and their only concern is water. What is this going to mean for water in our community? How do I make sense of 200 pages of permit applications that are showing up on my desk? Tell me what this means for water. And so with nations, we're working with them to say, what's the priority? What are you worried about? And address that issue so that all the other permits that flow, they know the commitments have been made about water and that's been addressed and they can be supportive of the project. So there are a number of different avenues. I'm proud of the work we've done on permitting, but I also know that it's still a source of frustration and that we can do a lot more to get those mines done. You know, in the Northeast, we had a major mine, 1,800 people are going to work at this mine, hit substantial construction start, new mine opened, old mines that were closed are reopening. The mining sector has a lot going on right now, even with low resource prices, and it is a huge source of opportunity for our province.
Northeast or Northwest?
Northwest. Did I say Northeast?
Yeah.
Northwest.
Okay.
End of the day. Thanks, Stu.
Yeah. I know I've gone a little bit over the agreed time, but could you take one more question from Alec and then I'll give you an opportunity to just give us some closing remarks?
Well, what's the question about?
Well, I can't see inside Alec's mind. Alec.
My last question for you today, Premier, is, so again, you've been in this job for almost 2 years. You've talked multiple times about the frustration, about the pace of government. What is your biggest regret or maybe your biggest frustration after having been in the job for 2 years?
Well, you know, the reason why I'm excited to take on this work, the reason why, and it's like a lot of jobs, you know, it puts demands on family, it puts demands on your time. It's unlike a lot of jobs in that there is additional scrutiny and challenge that the family faces that they wouldn't maybe if you were doing another job. But the reason why, like, I really want to do this work is I really want to see, and I need to see, the realization of the kind of British Columbia that I know we can have. A province that where people can access the home that they can afford, that's near work, where they're able to build a good life for themselves, where we're developing our economy in a way that we're going to be proud to tell our kids about, and they see a future for themselves in the province. We can achieve all of these things. And I've seen it. I've seen it in community after community. We have UBCM talking with the mayors about different projects we worked on. And the frustration and the continual headache is around, I don't want to use a rough word as we call it at our house. The initials are BS. So we deal with the BS like it's like, man, we just got to get this thing done. And then there's like a BS thing that comes up, and it's like, it's just like stutter steps, and there are two competing interests. One is we got to fix this process so we don't keep running into this BS, and then the other is, let's just get this thing done. and not worry so much about the process. And it's that frustration and that tension between wanting to fix the process so that it doesn't keep happening, so that things are faster and smoother, and wanting to get the thing done so it's actually in the community, people can actually see it. People can't see process changes in their lives. It's like, guess what? We really smoothed out the process for this. You're going to really enjoy it. It's like, it's a terrible conversation to have with someone. It's like, where's the thing? So I really want to deliver the thing. And when it involves a huge amount of process and we have to go back and I have to say get the lawyers in and we got to figure it out. And I know we have the authority to do it. Don't tell me we don't have the authority. That's the stuff that drives me crazy.
So then...
Sorry, Alec, that was helpful. I feel better. I feel lighter. I feel nice.
That was cathartic, was it? Yeah. Let's just wrap up on your vision of what your next term could look like, given that you're going to be successful on October the 19th. What's your vision for what you want from your government, and how will you measure success?
So I think that there are a whole array of specific metrics that I want to see. I want to see rent continue to come down. I want to see housing to be accessible and more affordable for people. I want to see no closures of rural ERs. I want to see every British Columbian have access to a family doctor. But the real measurement will be whether people, when they're looking around, when you get Mario on, we're 4 years later, we get Mario on, he's like, well, the polling on David Eby, and that the most awkward moment of your goddamn show. And he says,
love Mario's job reviews.
I did. And he says, people have seen an impact from government's action. They see that their lives are better and heading in the right direction. And that will be a significant indicator for me that was time well spent. And I would love that outcome.
So it's going to come down to Mario.
Yeah, I'll call Mario up.
Thank you very much. I
Stu.
Appreciate you coming back again. You're remarkable because you do not put conditions on what we can and can't talk about. And with every question, you're on top of it.
Didn't know we could do that.
You said that
last time, Stu. That's a problem with showing up 4 times. Thanks, Stu, for having me. I love being on your show.
Great. You get to take the coveted Conversations Live mug home with you. And to everybody, both in the room and online, I want to once again just bring your attention to the Pacific Autism Family Network. Check them out, and if there's anything that you can do to support them, and I know they're very appreciative of your support. Thank you, and join us again on October the 7th for our next Conversations Live, the election and the economy. Good day.
Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.